every weekday, long before the city fully wakes up, before the baristas grind their first beans, before the buses fill with commuters, even before the streetlights blink off, a man in a faded navy jumpsuit steps through the employee entrance of First Metropolitan Trust. His boots are scuffed, his gloves thin from use, and the mop bucket he wheels behind him squeaks just slightly on the polished marble floor. To anyone glancing his way, he's just part of the scenery, the kind of person people walk past without really seeing. And that's exactly how he wants it. He doesn't mind the early hours. In fact, he prefers them. There's a kind of quiet honesty in the dark, empty halls of a bank before business begins. No rehearsed smiles, no performance for clients, no layers of corporate polish. Just the hum of the HVAC system, the occasional beep of a keypad, and the soft swish of a mop across tile. For weeks now, this has been his routine. 6:15 on the dot. Unlock the supply closet. Fill the bucket. Start on the ground floor, work his way up. He takes his time, not because he's slow, but because he's listening. Because here's the thing no one knows. This man isn't actually a janitor. He's the bank's new CEO. He took the job 3 months ago after a long career in community finance, known more for turning around struggling credit unions than climbing the glossy ladders of big banking. When the board offered him the top seat at First Metropolitan, he accepted, but with one condition. Before he made any sweeping changes, before he approved a single budget or signed off on a new strategy, he wanted to understand the real heartbeat of the place, not the version presented in quarterly reports or executive summaries, but the truth that lives in break rooms, elevator rides, and hushed conversations near the copy machine. So he came up with a plan. He'd work undercover, not as a mystery shopper or a hidden camera stunt, but as someone who genuinely did the work. He trained with the facilities team for 2 weeks, learning how to strip wax, unclog drains, and refill soap dispensers without spilling a drop. He wore the same uniform, clocked in on the same system, and followed the same schedule. No special treatment. No safety net. If someone snapped at him or ignored him, he'd take it just like anyone else would. At first, it felt strange. People looked right through him. Tellers chatted about weekend plans while he wiped down the counters beside them, as if he weren't there. Loan officers walked past without a nod, their eyes fixed on their phones or each other. But that invisibility became his greatest tool, because when people think no one important is listening, they speak freely. He heard a lot. He heard the assistant manager complain that the cleaning crew never does the corners right. He overheard a senior advisor say, "Why do they even bother mopping? It's just going to get dirty again." He watched as a security guard held the door for everyone, except the night custodian, who had to fumble with her keycard while balancing a trash bag. But he also saw kindness. The young intern who always said thank you and asked how his morning was going. The retired teller who came in once a week just to drop off homemade cookies for the overnight staff. The IT guy who fixed the broken light in the janitor's closet without being asked. It was this mix, the good and the ugly, that he needed to see. Because leadership isn't just about balance sheets and growth targets. It's about people. And people reveal their true selves not in boardrooms, but in how they treat those they think can't help or hurt their careers. This particular morning starts like any other. The sky is still deep indigo, streaked with the faintest hint of orange on the horizon. Inside the bank, the only light comes from the emergency exit signs and the soft glow of the security desk. He fills his bucket with warm water and a splash of citrus-scented cleaner, his favorite because it smells like his grandmother's kitchen. He starts in the lobby, mopping in slow, even strokes, careful not to leave streaks on the marble. By 6:45, the first employees begin to trickle in. A few nod politely. Most don't make eye contact. He doesn't take it personally. He knows how uniforms work. They flatten a person into a role, erase their history, their dreams, their name. He's seen it his whole life, long before he ever wore a suit or sat in a corner office. Around 7:10, he moves to the executive wing. It's quieter here, thicker carpet, heavier doors, photos of past CEOs lining the hallway. He's been told this area is low priority, but he insists on doing it anyway. He figures if the top brass expect perfection from everyone else, their own space should reflect that standard too. He's just finishing the floor outside the main conference room when he hears sharp footsteps clicking down the hall. He doesn't look up right away. He keeps mopping, steady and calm. But the footsteps stop. Then a voice cuts through the quiet, sharp as broken glass. "What are you doing here?" He straightens slowly, turning to face the man standing a few feet away. Mid-40s, crisp charcoal suit, perfectly knotted tie, hair combed back like he's posing for a corporate headshot. The man's eyes narrow, scanning him from boots to cap like he's found a bug in his soup. "This wing is restricted," the man snaps. "You don't have clearance." The janitor, no, the CEO, meets his gaze evenly. "I was assigned to clean this area," he says, voice low but clear. "Got the work order right here." He taps the clipboard hanging from his belt. The man snorts. "Don't give me that. I've run this branch for 11 years. I know who's supposed to be where, and you're not supposed to be here." A few other employees have paused nearby, sensing tension. No one steps in. No one says a word. "I'm just doing my job," the man in the jumpsuit replies, keeping his tone neutral. "Your job is downstairs," the suit shoots back. "In the basement. With the trash and the mops. Not up here where decisions are made." There's a pause. The kind that hangs heavy in the air, thick with something unspoken but deeply felt. Then the man in the suit pulls out his phone. "I'm calling security. We've got an intruder in the executive wing." The words land like stones. Not mistake, not confusion. Intruder. As if wearing a uniform makes someone a threat. The janitor doesn't argue. He doesn't raise his voice. He just stands there, bucket at his side, watching as the man dials with stiff, angry fingers. Around them, the hallway feels colder, even though the thermostat hasn't changed. But inside, something shifts. Because this moment, is exactly why he's here. Not for the drama. Not for the confrontation. But to see with his own eyes how deeply the rot goes, and whether it can be cleaned. He takes a slow breath. The citrus scent rises from the bucket, sharp and clean. Outside, the first rays of sunlight finally touch the glass facade of the bank, turning the marble floors gold. The day has only just begun. The man in the suit stood rigid, phone pressed to his ear, jaw clenched like he was holding back more than just words. His eyes never left the janitor, cold, assessing, as if trying to decide whether this was a mistake or a deliberate act of defiance. Around them, the hallway had gone still. A junior analyst paused mid-stride, coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. A security guard down the hall slowed his patrol, sensing something was off but unsure if he should step in. Then the voice on the other end of the call answered. "Yeah, it's me," the suited man said, voice clipped and sharp. "We've got someone unauthorized in the executive wing, wearing janitorial gear. Claims he's supposed to be here. He's not on the morning roster for this floor. Get up here now." He hung up without waiting for a reply. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the faint drip of water from the mop head back into the bucket. The janitor didn't flinch. He'd seen this kind of reaction before. Not just in banks, but in grocery stores, airports, even churches. It wasn't about rules. It was about who people assumed belonged and who they decided didn't. And once that line was drawn in someone's mind, facts rarely mattered. "You really think I'd risk my job sneaking up here?" the janitor asked quietly. "I've got a wife, 2 kids in school. This uniform pays their lunch money," the suited man scoffed. "Spare me the sob story. If you were legit, you'd know this floor is off limits before 8 a.m., unless you've got written approval from regional ops. I've been cleaning this wing every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 weeks, the janitor said, still calm. Same time. Same route. Even wiped the glass on your office door last week. You left your do not disturb sign hanging crooked. That gave the man pause. Just for a second, his eyes flickered as if trying to recall. But pride kicked in fast. That doesn't prove anything. Anyone could have seen that sign. Before the janitor could respond, heavy footsteps echoed from the stairwell. 2 security officers appeared, both in dark uniforms, radios clipped to their belts, expressions neutral but alert. They'd been briefed over the radio. Possible trespasser, possible impersonation. The suited man pointed. Him. He doesn't belong here. Escort him out. And check his ID. See if he's even on the vendor list. The older of the 2 guards, a man with silver at his temples and a name tag that read T. Ruiz, stepped forward. He didn't reach for cuffs or raise his voice. Instead, he looked the janitor in the eye. "Sir, can I see your badge?" The janitor nodded and reached slowly for his chest pocket. No sudden moves, no drama. He pulled out a standard-issue facility ID, laminated and worn at the edges. It showed his photo, his employee number, and the words, First Metropolitan Trust, Housekeeping Services. Ruiz studied it, then glanced at his partner, who tapped the number into a handheld scanner. A green light blinked. He's in the system, the younger guard murmured. Active clearance. Assigned to night and early morning shifts. The suited man's face tightened. That can't be right. Double-check it. It's correct, Ruiz said evenly. He's authorized, but not for this floor. The man shot back, voice rising. Not without my approval. Ruiz didn't argue. He just turned to the janitor. Were you given specific instructions to clean this area today? Yes, the janitor replied. From the facilities coordinator. Said the board's having a strategy session this afternoon, and they wanted everything spotless by 9. Ruiz nodded. That made sense. Big meetings always meant extra cleaning. He looked back at the suited man. Seems like it's all in order, sir. But the man wasn't backing down. If anything, he looked more frustrated, like the truth was an inconvenience. I don't care what the schedule says. From now on, no custodial staff enters the executive wing without my direct permission. Is that clear? The janitor said nothing. He just stood there, bucket in hand, watching the way the man's fingers tapped impatiently against his thigh. This wasn't about protocol. It was about control. About making sure everyone knew their place and that his place was at the top. Ruiz cleared his throat. Unless there's evidence of wrongdoing, we can't remove him. He's on the clock doing assigned work. The suited man exhaled sharply through his nose. Fine, but if I see him up here again without my say-so, I'm filing a formal complaint with facilities management. And I'll have his contract reviewed. He turned on his heel and walked away, his polished shoes clicking like a metronome counting down tension. The younger guard lingered for a moment, then gave the janitor a small, almost imperceptible nod before following his partner back toward the lobby. The hallway emptied again, but the air still felt charged like after a storm that never quite broke. The janitor took a slow breath and went back to work. He finished the last few feet of hallway, wrung out the mop and moved toward the conference room doors. As he cleaned the glass panels, he caught his own reflection. Tired eyes, a line of sweat at his temple, the faded logo on his chest. He looked exactly like what people expected. A worker, invisible, replaceable. But he knew something they didn't. He'd been watching this man, the one in the suit, for weeks. Not just today. Every time he'd come through the branch, he treated the cleaning crew like furniture. Once he'd made a custodian wait 10 minutes outside his office while he finished a personal call, even though the trash bin was overflowing. Another time he'd snapped at a woman refilling the hand soap in the executive restroom, saying, "Do you have to do that now? Can't it wait 5 minutes?" It wasn't just rudeness. It was a pattern. A belief that some people's time mattered more than others. That dignity was a privilege, not a right. And now, standing here with a mop in his hand and the echo of intruder still ringing in his ears, he realized something else. This man had no idea who he was really talking to. Later that morning, as the bank came fully alive, tellers logging in, clients arriving, phones starting to ring, the janitor packed up his supplies. He wheeled his cart back to the utility closet, hung up his gloves, and clocked out. But before he left, he stopped by the break room. On the bulletin board, tucked between flyers for carpool groups and lost umbrellas, was a printed org chart. He looked at it for a long time. There, near the top under Regional Operations Management, was a photo. The same sharp suit, the same cold eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't feel triumphant. What he felt was resolve. Because leadership isn't just about making decisions from a corner office. It's about seeing people, really seeing them, and holding space for their humanity no matter what uniform they wear. And if the person in charge couldn't do that, then maybe it was time for a change. He walked out into the morning sun, the city buzzing around him. The day wasn't over, not by a long shot. But the real work, the kind that mattered, was just beginning. The next morning arrived with the same quiet rhythm as all the others. Gray light creeping over rooftops, delivery trucks rumbling down side streets, the first birds calling from bare branches. But inside the bank, something had shifted. You could feel it in the air, like the hush before a thunderstorm. People moved a little slower, spoke a little softer, glanced over their shoulders more than usual. Word had spread not in loud announcements, but in whispers over coffee, in quick text during bathroom breaks, in the way eyes met and then looked away. The man in the suit, the one who'd called the janitor an intruder, walked in at 7:45 sharp, as always. He adjusted his cufflinks, nodded stiffly at the security desk, and headed straight for his office without a word to anyone. But his usual confidence seemed thinner today, stretched tight over something uneasy. He kept checking his phone, jaw working like he was grinding down a bitter pill. He didn't know it yet, but today would be different. The janitor arrived at 6:15, same as always. Same boots, same bucket, same quiet presence. He didn't look around nervously or act like he was waiting for something. He just got to work. But this time, when he turned down the hallway toward the executive wing, he didn't hesitate. He pushed his cart right up to the conference room doors, the very spot where he'd been confronted the day before, and began wiping down the baseboards. Within 20 minutes, the suited man appeared again. This time he wasn't alone. He had 2 junior managers trailing behind him, folders tucked under their arms, faces carefully neutral. He stopped short when he saw the janitor. "You're still here?" he said, voice low but edged with disbelief. "I'm on shift," the janitor replied without looking up. "Got 3 floors to finish before 9. The suited man's hands clenched at his sides. "I told you, this area is off limits unless I approve it." "Facilities schedule says otherwise," the janitor said calmly. "And security confirmed it yesterday." That seemed to ignite something. The man stepped closer, voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Don't test me. I've dealt with people like you before. You think you can just show up wherever you want, act like you belong. I do belong," the janitor said, finally meeting his eyes. "I work here, just like you." The words hung in the air. The 2 junior managers exchanged glances but said nothing. One of them actually took a half step back. The suited man's face flushed. "You don't know who you're talking to." "I know exactly who I'm talking to," the janitor said. "A man who judges people by their uniform instead of their character. That did it." The man spun around and barked, "Call security again. And this time tell them it's a repeat offense. I want him removed permanently." Within minutes, the same 2 guards returned, Ruiz and his partner. But this time, Ruiz didn't look confused or neutral. He looked tired, like he'd seen this kind of thing too many times before. "Sir," Ruiz said, addressing the suited man. "He's cleared. We verified it twice yesterday. He's on the official roster." "I don't care," the man snapped. "He's disrupting operations. He's insubordinate. I want him gone." Ruiz turned to the janitor. "Is that true? Were you being disrespectful?" The janitor shook his head. "I asked to do my job. That's all." The suited man threw up his hands. "See, he's twisting everything. Just get him out of here before I escalate this to corporate." Ruiz hesitated. He knew the rules. Technically, a department head could request removal of a vendor if they felt safety or productivity was at risk. But this didn't feel like safety. It felt personal. Before he could decide, the janitor sighed softly. "You really want me gone that bad?" "Yes," the man said, crossing his arms. "Because you don't belong here." The janitor nodded slowly. Then, without drama, without anger, he reached into the inner pocket of his jumpsuit. Not the one with his ID, but a smaller, hidden seam near his chest. He pulled out a slim black lanyard. On it hung a single badge. It wasn't plastic. It wasn't laminated like the janitorial ID. It was thick, matte black with silver lettering and a subtle embossed seal in the corner, the bank's official crest. At the top, in clean, bold type, it read, Chief Executive Officer. Below that, a photo. The same face, the same calm eyes. But now, framed in authority, silence crashed down like a dropped shelf. The junior managers froze. Ruiz's eyebrow shot up. Even the younger guard took a sharp breath. The suited man stared, then blinked, then stared again as if his eyes were playing a trick on him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face went from red to pale in seconds, like someone had flipped a switch inside him. The janitor, no, the CEO, held the badge steady. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't belong here. As a janitor. Because I'm not one." He paused, letting the truth sink in. "I've been walking these halls for 3 weeks. Mopping floors, emptying trash. Listening to how people talk when they think no one important is around. I've heard you call the night crew lazy. I've watched you ignore the cafeteria staff when they say good morning. And yesterday you called me an intruder because I was wearing a uniform." The suited man took a stumbling step back, shaking his head slightly, like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. "I didn't." He started, then stopped. What could he say? Deny it? Pretend he hadn't done exactly what he'd done? The CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He just looked at the man with something deeper than anger. Disappointment. "You asked who I was talking to. Now you know. But more importantly, I know who you are." Ruiz cleared his throat gently. "Sir, do you need us to—" "No," the CEO said, slipping the badge back into his pocket. "But thank you for doing your job with fairness, even when it wasn't easy." He turned to the two junior managers who looked like they wanted to disappear into the carpet. "You both work hard. I've seen it. Keep leading with respect, especially for those who can't return the favor." Then he looked back at the man in the suit. "We'll talk later. In my office." He picked up his mop, gave the handle a small, thoughtful turn, and walked calmly down the hall, past the stunned faces, past the hushed gasps starting to ripple through the nearby cubicles, past the security desk where the morning guard now stood wide-eyed. But he didn't go to the executive suite. He went back to the utility closet, because the shift wasn't over. And neither was the lesson. Outside, the sun had fully risen. Light poured through the bank's tall windows, glinting off the freshly mopped floors. And for the first time in a long time, those floors didn't just reflect light. They reflected truth. By mid-morning, the news had spread through the bank like a ripple across a still pond. Quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. It wasn't posted on any official channel. No email blast, no all-staff memo. But people knew. They always do. A hushed word in the break room. A glance exchanged near the water cooler. A text that read, "You're not going to believe what happened on the 4th floor." Some thought it was a rumor. Others swore they'd seen it with their own eyes. But one thing was certain. The man everyone assumed was just another janitor was actually the bank's new CEO, and he'd been working in disguise for weeks. The suited man, the one who'd called security, who'd demanded the janitor be thrown out, hadn't left his office since the confrontation. The blinds were drawn. His assistant kept turning people away, saying he was in a private meeting. But everyone knew the truth. He was hiding. Not from punishment, but from shame. Meanwhile, the CEO didn't retreat to a corner office or call an emergency board session. Instead, he did something unexpected. He stayed in his jumpsuit. He finished his shift. He wiped down the last of the handrails, refilled the paper towel dispensers in the restrooms, and even helped a new intern figure out how to unjam the coffee machine in the staff lounge. He spoke to people not as a boss giving orders, but as someone who'd shared their early mornings and seen their quiet efforts. At 11 a.m., he walked into the main break room, the one most executives never set foot in. It was small, with mismatched chairs, a dented microwave, and a bulletin board covered in grocery lists, bus schedules, and birthday cards signed by the overnight crew. He didn't announce himself. He just poured a cup of coffee from the pot labeled housekeeping only and sat at the worn vinyl booth in the corner. Within minutes, people started drifting in, not out of obligation, but curiosity. The woman who ran the mailroom. The security guard who'd stood up for him. The young teller who always said good morning even when no one else did. They didn't crowd him. They just sat nearby, sipping their drinks, stealing glances. Finally, someone asked, "Is it true? Were you really him?" He smiled faintly. "I still am, just wearing a different uniform today." That broke the ice. Questions came gently, respectfully. "Why'd you do it? Was it scary? Did you really mop all those floors yourself?" He answered each one honestly. "I needed to see the bank through your eyes," he said. "Not the numbers on a screen, not the reports on my desk, but the real day-to-day. Because if I'm going to lead this place, I have to understand the people who keep it running." One of the custodians, a woman with silver-streaked hair and hands rough from years of work, leaned forward. "Most bosses don't even know our names." "I know yours," he said softly. "And I know you've been asking for better gloves since last winter. I saw your request in the system. It got lost in a folder labeled low priority. That ends today." She blinked, then looked down at her hands like she couldn't believe it. Later that afternoon, he called a meeting. but not in the polished boardroom with its leather chairs and glass table. He gathered everyone, tellers, loan officers, IT staff, cleaners, security, even the cafeteria workers, in the main lobby after hours. Chairs were arranged in a wide circle. No podium, no PowerPoint, just people. He stood in the center, still in his navy jumpsuit, though now with the CEO badge visible around his neck. "I'm not here to fire anyone," he began. "Not even the man who tried to have me removed. What happened wasn't just about him. It was about a culture that lets people feel invisible. And that stops now." He laid out 3 changes, simple but powerful. First, every employee, regardless of role, would be invited to quarterly town halls where leadership would answer real questions, not scripted ones. Second, a new anonymous feedback system would launch the following week, with a promise that every concern would be reviewed within 48 hours. Third, starting immediately, all frontline staff would receive the same professional development opportunities as managers, training, mentorship, even paths to advancement. But the biggest change, he said, looking around the room, is how we see each other. A title doesn't make someone worthy of respect. Kindness does. Attention does. The way you say thank you to the person who empties your trash, that matters more than any quarterly profit. He paused. "I wore this uniform not to trick anyone, but to remind myself, and all of us, that dignity isn't earned by your job description. It's given freely because you're human." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then someone clapped. Then another. Soon the whole space was filled with steady, heartfelt applause, not for a performance, but for a promise. As people filed out, many stopped to thank him. Not for being CEO, but for seeing them. Back in his office later that evening, now dressed in a simple button-down, sleeves rolled up, he reviewed the personnel file of the suited man. There were no immediate plans to fire him. Instead, he'd scheduled a one-on-one meeting for the next morning. Not to humiliate, but to understand. Because real change doesn't come from punishment alone. It comes from accountability paired with a chance to grow. He also signed off on a dozen overdue requests. New mops with ergonomic handles, updated break room furniture, even a small fund for staff appreciation lunches. Small things, maybe. But to the people who'd asked for them for years, they were everything. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on. Inside, the bank felt different. Not because the walls had changed, but because the air had. Lighter, clearer, like someone had finally opened a window after years of stale air. Leadership, he thought, isn't about standing above people. It's about standing beside them, even if you have to wear a mop bucket to prove it.